Imagine a winter night 54,000 years ago in the Altai Mountains of Siberia. In a shallow cave above a frozen river, a small group of Neanderthals warms their hands over embers. They are not movie cavemen, they are parents, siblings, and cousins trying to make it through another hard season. When geneticists finally read their DNA in 2022, they found something astonishing. Among the bones was a father-daughter pair proof. These people were close kin, living together in a tiny band on the edge of the steppe. News headlines pounced. Were Neanderthals inbred? Did cavemen marry their relatives? Tonight we're going to separate tabloid myth from real science. We'll ask three big questions. What did marriage even mean in the Paleolithic? Why does evolution punish close-akin mating? And what does archaeology, bones, tools, ancient DNA actually show about how our ancestors chose partners? The answers are more human, more complicated, and in many ways more hopeful than the stereotypes. Every culture on Earth wrestles with the incest taboo. From the Hebrew Bible's laws in Leviticus to Hindu Gotra, rules discouraging unions within a lineage, to the exogamy norms of indigenous foragers in Australia and the Americas, people have set boundaries around who one can marry. Anthropologists have long debated why the taboo is so widespread. Is it moral law, divine command, social engineering, or biology? In 1891, the Finnish scholar Edvard Westermark proposed a radical idea. Children who grow up together develop sexual aversion toward one another. The Westermark effect, a built-in incest shield. Decades later, real-world natural experiments supported him. Israeli kibbutzim, where unrelated children were raised in the same peer groups, showed very low marriage rates within those groups, while minor marriages in historical Taiwan, arranged unions where a future bride was adopted young into the groom's household, had higher infertility and divorce, consistent with aversion and poor outcomes when cod-reared kids later wed. Evolution provides the other half of the answer. Closed-kin unions stack identical copies of recessive mutations, a problem called inbreeding depression. If you're a small band of foragers already walking the edge of survival, that's a cost you can't afford. So the big evolutionary prediction is simple. If our ancestors could avoid close kin, they did. But predictions need evidence. Before we dive into DNA, we need to admit that marriage is our word, not theirs. In the Paleolithic, there were no priests, no written contracts, no bride price receipts in clay, but there were pair bonds, alliances between families, and long-distance networks that traded stone, ochre, shells, and, crucially, people. Classic ethnography on mobile foragers such as the Hadza of Tanzania, the Yuhawansi of the Kalahari, and the Ake of Paraguay shows a pattern. Bands are small, 20-50 people, fluid, and they swap members frequently. Most long-term unions form across camps. Why? Because taking a spouse from another group reduces inbreeding and forges alliances. Two forms of insurance in a dangerous world. Archaeology gives us physical snapshots of this behavior. At Songhir in Russia, a spectacular Upper Paleolithic burial site dated to 6th to 36,000 years ago, individuals laid to rest together. Two adolescents adorned with over 10,000 beads were not close relatives when their genomes were sequenced in 2017. That study argued their community maintained an exogamous mating network across bands to avoid inbreeding, exactly what ethnography predicts for small, mobile groups. So did Paleolithic people marry? Siblings? If by marry we mean form ordinary, socially approved unions, the best evidence says no. But small populations sometimes have no choice, and that's where the ancient DNA gets interesting. El Sidrón Cave, Spain, 29,000 years ago. In 2011, a team led by Carles Lalueza Fox studied Neanderthal remains from a massacre or catastrophe that wiped out at least 12 individuals. They extracted mitochondrial DNA maternally inherited and compared patterns among the adults. The males shared the same maternal lineage, while the females carried different mtDNA haplotypes. The genetic signature of patrilocality, men staying put, women moving in from other bands. That's classic exogamy and kin avoidance, not sibling marriage. The Altai Neanderthal Genome, Denisova Cave, Siberia, published 2014. When K. Proofer and colleagues assembled the full genome of a Neanderthal from the Altai, they saw unusually long runs of homozygosity, evidence that her parents were closely related, on the order of half-fusiblings, an uncle-niece pair, or double first cousins. That's rare and costly, but it happens when populations are tiny and isolated. Think of it as a demographic bottleneck, not a default cultural choice. Deni, the first-generation hybrid Denisova 11, published 2018. In 2018, Viviane Slong, Svante Piebo, and colleagues dropped a bombshell in Nature. A bone fragment belonged to a teenage girl whose mother was Neanderthal and father was Denisovan, two sister lineages of archaic humans. This wasn't inbreeding, it was intergroup mating across species, but it shows Paleolithic people didn't stick to narrow pools when they could help it. Gene flow was part of survival. Chagirskaya and Okladnikov Caves. Altai published 2022. Sequencing of 13 Neanderthals by Loret Skov, and a large team found the headline og-grabbing father-daughter pair and other close paternal relatives in the same cave. The broader signal again pointed to small groups with female dispersal between bands, exogamy, even though in a given winter you might find a handful of relatives huddled in one rock shelter. Put these together and a pattern emerges. Neanderthals and early modern humans mostly avoided close kin unions by exchanging mates between bands, but occasional close relatedness appears in isolated groups, especially on the geographic fringes. Archaeology and geochemistry back this up. Strontium isotope studies track where someone grew up by the chemistry locked in their teeth. In southern Africa, a 2011 Nature paper found that among 2-million-year-old hominins, likely Australopithecus and Paranthropus, smaller-bodied individuals, probably females, moved farther from their natal ranges than larger males. If female dispersal is that ancient, anti-inbreeding strategies predate both Neanderthals and us. Myths that muddy the waters. Myth 1: incest was normal in the Stone Age. No. The overwhelming cross-cultural pattern among mobile foragers is exogamy, and the strongest genetic signals point to mate exchange networks. The rare counterexamples signal demographic stress, not a moral rule. Myth 2: royal sibling marriage in ancient Egypt proves early humans did it too. Dynastic sibling unions are a late, elite, symbolic phenomenon tied to theology and political power, e.g., keeping divine bloodlines pure. They tell us almost nothing about hunter-gatherer norms tens of thousands of years earlier. Even in pharaonic Egypt, these marriages were exceptional and elite-specific. Myth 3: religions invented the incest taboo from scratch. Most faith traditions codified taboos that were already socially and biologically adaptive. The Hebrew Bible bans unions among close kin. Hindu Gotra rules encourage marrying outside one's patriline. Catholic canon law once banned marriages within 7 degrees, later relaxed. These are cultural technologies layered atop a deeper human aversion that likely arises from the Westermarck effect and the costs of inbreeding. Myth 4: if bands were only 30 people, they had no choice. Bands were not genetic islands. People visited, traded, feasted, adopted orphans, and switched camps. Seasonal aggregations. The reindeer hunts at places like Pinsfent and Verberie in France or mammoth megasites in Ukraine brought hundreds together. Perfect venues for matchmaking. Small camps, big networks. What about Homo sapiens, our ancestors? When we look at early modern humans across Eurasia after 45,000 years ago, a few consistent signals pop: exogamy and mobility. Sites like Sungheir show non-relatives buried together in elaborate rituals, implying alliances between families. Shell beads and obsidian move hundreds of kilometers, proof of intergroup contacts. No close akin unions in high-status burials. If the elites of the Upper Paleolithic were avoiding inbreeding, that likely reflects wider norms. Admixture across continents. Our species absorbed genes from Neanderthals and Denisovans multiple times, the most famous infusion around 50,000–60,000 years ago, showing that when groups met, intermarriage, not isolation, was common. Even in the Holocene, when farming begins, the anti-inbreeding logic holds. In the linear Bankaramic culture of Central Europe c. 5500–4900 BCE, isotope and DNA studies documented female exogamy. Women moved to men's villages, again reducing kin unions. Later agricultural societies do show first-to-cousin marriages in some regions, but those are historical, structured choices, not Paleolithic defaults. So, did anyone ever marry a sibling? The honest answer is rarely, and usually under duress. The clearest genetic evidence of very close kin in the Paleolithic is the Altai Neanderthal, with inbred parents. The Chagirskaya dataset shows a father and daughter living at the same time in the same cave. Those findings do not prove a cultural rule of sibling marriage, And in fact, the broader patterns at El Sidron and Sunghia argue against it. They show what you'd expect from small, scattered populations facing Ice Age winters. Most bands built rules and habits to avoid inbreeding, and once in a while the network broke and people paired with whoever was left. If you want a modern analogy, think of remote island communities hit by storms. Most years ferries come and go, people marry outsiders. Some years the boats don't run. A few children are born to close cousins. That doesn't mean the culture endorses it, it means life got hard. The human layer, taboos, teaching, and memory. How did people enforce this before genetics? Story and structure. Foragers teach kinship terms with exquisite detail. Who counts as a sibling? Who is a cousin? Who is a potential spouse? Many groups use moieties or clans. You must marry outside your own. Among Australian Aboriginal peoples, skin name systems can encode dozens of rules that channel marriage far from close kin. These systems are information technologies, oral algorithms keeping the gene pool healthy. Even the myths of gods marrying siblings may be a way for humans to say, we are not gods, the rules are different for us. Where religious texts do discuss close unions among first humans. Think of interpretations around Adam and Eve. Traditions generally move quickly to ban or limit those unions as the human family expands. In other words, the arc of cultural law bends toward wider circles.